I think about four things. So wellbeing is psychological wellbeing, social wellbeing, emotional wellbeing and physical wellbeing.
Welcome to Life Untangled. I'm Professor Jane Burns, and in each episode we speak to people from all walks of life about their passions, the messiness of life and what they're doing to make the world a better place.
You're listening to another Torched Original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com. That's GETTORCHT.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome, Hayden Fricke, to Life Untangled. Fabulous to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Jane. Great to be here.
And where have you come from?
The last couple of days been at a 2-day strategic planning conference, so I'm energised, ready to go.
And that was for Steople?
That's right. We had a global or regional planning session for Steople.
And what's your job?
So I'm the Global Managing Director of Steople. Founded the business 13 years ago.
13 years ago. We love a global manager. So what does the day in the life of Hayden Fricke look like? What's a normal day for you?
Well, the first thing to say is there is no normal. Yep. It's incredibly, a lot of variety. It could be from doing a podcast like this through to running a strategy session through to coaching an individual. Incredibly varied, and I love that.
And you travel a lot?
Well, obviously COVID stopped that a fair bit, so I travel virtually now. As things have opened up, certainly travelled a lot more to the US and to Queensland, throughout Australia, and to New Zealand, where we've got an office too.
Yep. And what sort of industries are you working with?
If you think of any industry, I think we're in it, because we're a people business. Yep. So right across from private sector to federal government in Canberra, state government, local government, not-for-profits.
Okay. What excites you about your work?
I'm really passionate about helping people, individuals and teams change their behaviours in ways that stick.
When you say stick, what does that mean?
We know that habits are really hard, right? Changing diet, exercise, sticking to something is so hard. And so I help leaders to change their own leadership habits in ways that last more than a month or so, that they can change in ways that last for the rest of their leadership career.
And that must translate across into life as well.
Absolutely, spot on. I think in the past we used to separate out life and work, but now, certainly with the pandemic, it's much more aligned. We have to think about the whole person.
And are you seeing leaders come to you with that, how do I get the work-life balance right? What does a hybrid workplace look like? I've got people working at home, in the work environment.
Yep.
How has that changed your conversations that you have with people?
Look, for the last probably 10 or 11 years, we have been pushing the concept of wellbeing and how important that is for sustainable leadership. In the last 2 years, we haven't had to push it. It's coming at us. And so now leaders not only have to drive performance, they have to also have some role in taking care of the wellbeing of their staff, which is hard. So they need help in doing that. But I'm certainly having a lot of conversations about both performance and wellbeing now.
Look, it's interesting because, as you know, I've been in the prevention space for 20 plus years and really pushed how do we actually think about what it means to keep people mentally fit, healthy and well, which is very different to how do we support people if they are living with or experiencing a mental illness. And we tend to have put all our eggs into the mental illness bucket, the services. So 99% of the budget's spent on that, 1% is spent on prevention. Do you think that dial's shifted and changed?
It's starting to. I think it needs to shift a lot more, but yes, I'm certainly, everything we focus is on prevention, and it's not really mental illness, it's mental health. So how do we help people move towards flourishing and thriving lives at work and at home? The dial is shifting, it's still got to shift a lot more.
It's got a long way to go, hasn't it? It has. And I think if anything, some of the laws that have come in about you're not allowed to break people at work. And I know, we do a lot of work with Martin Campbell from WorkSafe SA and heads of WorkSafe authorities, and, that dial is going in the wrong direction. You've got 30% increase in psychological health claims every year. Something's got to give. So leaders have to step up and start to think about how they change the culture of workplace, which is don't break people. But what does that mean? And I think wellbeing, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because wellbeing's sort of got this bit of a bad name. Like, what is it? Is it yoga? Is it mindfulness? Is it So if you defined well-being for us, how would you define it?
Well-being, and I can give you the answer that I've been researching as part of the book that I'll tell you about shortly.
Oh yeah, we're looking forward to that.
I think about four things. So well-being is psychological well-being, social well-being, emotional well-being and physical well-being. So it's those broad four categories that we look at, and a lot of people might just think about, say, physical and psychological, but it is broader than that.
Yeah, and that's important because, I mean, our head's not separate from our heart, is it?
That's right.
And yet often we think of these things as being different entities, our bodies being different to our minds, and yet they are so interconnected.
They are. And I'll give you a quick example of how sometimes it's challenging to get the balance right because, for example, alcohol. You would say that if you just took a physical perspective on this, you'd say alcohol's bad for you, don't drink alcohol. But there's a social wellbeing side, and alcohol does play some positive element in social wellbeing. So how do you get the balance right between physical and social as one simple example?
So what's the example there? How do you?
I don't think there's a golden rule on this, but I would say that drinking in moderation in social contexts is something that it can enhance your social wellbeing. Although, of course, if you abuse alcohol, then that's not going to work. So particularly in a culture and a society where the social norms in Australia, it is more challenging socially to not drink alcohol. Anyway, that's a general rule. Individuals need to make their own decisions on that.
Yeah, it's good advice. Now, what do you really care passionately about apart from your own book? Which is important, and we will hear about the book.
Yeah. Look, a whole lot of things, but I guess for me, probably number one is around health and wellbeing. I've always lived a healthy life from both a physical perspective and tried to balance that out with psychological health and social health. And so those things have been part of my life forever. So I certainly care about that. Beyond that, it's family, friends, and I guess the third one has to be the purposeful role I play in running a global consulting company and driving and working with others that share my values and beliefs.
Yeah. So give us the 1 minute version of your life, and I know it's that's hard because you've had lots of hats. And how has it all come together into Steople, the company that you run as a global consultancy?
Well, I'm going to start with, I guess, the story in brief is that I started as a professional tennis player about 30 years ago, and I was unsuccessful. I lost too often because I choked and was anxious and stressed and did not understand how to cope with pressure and stress and so forth, and no one taught me that. And so I went to university, became a sports psychologist. So I worked as a sports psych and then said, right, I also did counselling, psychology, drug and alcohol counselling, worked with people with mental illness. From that I went, right, I actually love positive psychology and I want to work in positive psychology, but I want to work in an industry where I can get paid better than sports psych. So I moved across and did a master's degree in organisational psychology back in 1996. So I've been an org psych since 1996 in different guises.
Yeah, but what an incredible different wearing of hats. Elite athlete, then training in sports psych, then org, and the positive psych. And positive psych had a pretty bad name for a short period of time. And everyone was like, oh, it's all of this positive, weird, wacky. There's a real science behind it, isn't there?
Absolutely. In fact, I've got some colleagues here that have just finished their masters in positive psychology, so absolutely. And probably the founder and person that's most well known about it, done the great research, is Martin Seligman, who's done some fantastic research. So there's a huge amount of research behind the outcomes achieved through positive psychology. Yeah,
and even, now in Australia, we have our own incredible scientists across our universities who specialise in positive psych, and increasingly we're seeing it as being a part of the conversations that we're having, whether that's within the workplace, within the school environment. I think it has huge potential to just change the dial on how we think about. And you use the words not just surviving, but actually thriving in the face of adversity. And if ever there's a time of great adversity, it's global pandemic, financial stress, the impact of the pandemic, and the long tail of mental health challenges. And so we have to get better at thinking about how we create thriving communities and what that looks like. So
I think positive psychology had a bad name at the start because it was seen as, I just got to be happy all the time, and that's not what it's all about.
Help the listener understand that, because I think that's absolutely Right, and Brock Bastian, who you probably know, has written the happiness, a book about happiness and how we can't always strive to be happy. Why is that?
Well, there's kind of two thoughts I'm going to share. Positive psychology really does help us be things like grateful, appreciative of things, and we know that gratitude journals, appreciative and so forth, focusing on the positives is something that's going to enhance our well-being. But if we're focused just on that and we brush over some of the challenging things in life, that's not going to help us either. So that's where people like Brené Brown come in with concepts like vulnerability and being okay to be enough. You don't have to be perfect like social media shows. So it really is about balancing out being able to be human and authentic and real and share vulnerabilities, which is kind of it's kind of relieving to be able to do that, to be human. At the same time, not to ruminate and dwell on the negatives, but to be able to then turn that into focusing on the positives.
So that's a beautiful segue. I think you might have read the questions. But, what's been your greatest challenge? And it can be in work, but also in life, or it can be a multitude of different things. Because again, you know, scratch the surface and we've all got adversity. We all live through really challenging, difficult loss of a loved one, birth, you know, for me, birth of a child with a disability. Like, it was pretty hardcore. You with your tennis career and just being so anxious that you choked. What are yours?
Geez, I'm thinking of three, but I'm going to be vulnerable and share my biggest challenge. And interesting you say the tennis one, because that's small compared to what I'm about to share with you. So probably my greatest challenge in my life is to try to help deal with, support, whatever words I want to use, two brothers who have significant disabilities and mental health issues. So I have one brother who has schizophrenia. He had a mental breakdown when he was 17. I'm 2 years old. I was 19. And that's affected his life in a massive way. And my sister and I have been massive support to him. Over 30 years, he's been in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and he's had an incredibly sad life. And sometimes I feel helpless that I can't help him. I do what I can to give him small joys in life, but I can never kind of turn it around. I can give him small wins, and that's probably my greatest challenge. I do have another brother who has a mild intellectual disability, and as a result of that, he's also got anxiety and depression. He's a couple of years older than me, and I give him a lot of support. I see my two brothers struggling in life, and some of the other challenges that I see are small in comparison. So in some respects, when I tell people this story, they say, geez, they're lucky to have you. And I go, no, I'm in such a great position compared to them. I'm grateful that I've got a whole bunch of things that I was born with that are much better than them. So my biggest challenge is dealing with that.
Yeah, and again, thank you for sharing that, because from the outside, you look like you've got this wonderfully perfect, amazing, great business, great career, and yet families are complex and challenging. And I find, you know, with Angus, you know, he's nonverbal, autism, Down syndrome, the tiny snippets of joy, and we you know, I think just that is so important. And I do hope that we eventually have a society that embraces people who are different, embraces people who do actually have challenges, whether it is schizophrenia or whether it is an intellectual disability or whether it's, you know, neurodivergent. And we're getting better. We're getting better. And, you know, I know, again, from an organisational psych perspective, you talk about this and the importance of having difference within your work environment, because that's what gives you, you know, amazing opportunities to think differently, to work differently, to be more accepting. But, again, thank you. It's a really important message to get across.
Thank you. And I think it is, for me, the balance between that, and you go, okay, the sports psychology, the positive psychology, and a leader needs to demonstrate all of those positive things, but also needs to be real. And we all have families or challenges in life, and it's important that we're able to share those too.
Absolutely. So how do you live your best life?
I think I do it mostly, but the best life is to try to be authentic, to try to be real and not to try to be somebody else. And I know when I'm physically healthy, I feel better mentally. I also know when I start to get stressed and the workload gets too much, to try to purposefully slow down and do some mindfulness. And the great mindfulness in May that I recently did, just taking a minute here and there, Dr. Elise Bailey, I think it is. So just making sure that particularly when there's times of pressure and stress, that I take care of myself so that I can help others.
And that is important because it's little things. It doesn't necessarily, you don't need to be a yogi. Like you don't need to sit and for an hour and meditate. It can be something as simple as taking yourself out and, you know, going for a walk or taking time out. And I know recently I saw you on social media, I think you went surfing with one of your mates. That connection, that's the physical, but also the social. Those things are important, to take that time, to give yourself some space to sort of, we're all frantically busy, but do we really need to be this frantic all of the time, because it's not good for our mental health?
That story you just briefly mentioned there was, I had to go up to Queensland with our Queensland business at Steople and support one of our staff up there. And so I had 3 days there, but I took an extra day and I took a day off and I went surfing with a mate up there, and it was fantastic. I was like, you kind of feel a bit guilty doing it, but you need to do that to take care of yourself.
Well, and I think, and again, it reflects, it's walk the talk, talk the walk. You know, you can't be this guru of organisational psych if you're 24/7 working. It just doesn't make any sense. Eventually you're going to burn out, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, and walking the talk's a fascinating one too, because you're never going to get it perfect, but you're attempting to do the right thing.
Well, and I think that's perfection's not great, is it? Because no one's perfect. Right. We all have our foibles, we all have our flaws, we all have our, our real faults. And that's what being human's all about. So when you are vulnerable, and you've talked about being vulnerable, who do you reach out to get support? Or who are your people?
There's 3 or 4, maybe 5 people. There's kind of groups that I think about. First one's my wife. She's been incredibly supportive around my brothers, and really encouraged them. I mean, she's an OT, an occupational therapist, so she works in hospitals and healthcare and understands it, but is kind of certainly behind everything I'm trying to do and very helpful. Secondly, I've got a business partner who's been with me for 12 of the 13 years, and he's kind of like my brother almost, and I turn to him for advice all the time. A sister, and I've got probably 4 mates I'm actually going out for dinner with them tonight, and I can talk to them about anything. So I've got a really good support group.
Can I just pick up on the mates one? And we're a pretty stoic nation. And I remember when the startup of Beyond Blue, so back in the day, and we'd go out and we'd do the community awareness talks. I mean, they're much more sophisticated now. But I remember having conversations with, a lot of people about, oh, surely this is not a real thing. You should just be able to pull up your socks and get on with it. And, that's a very Australian thing, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I think I'm lucky that I guess because I'm a psychologist, I surround myself with people who talk about this stuff. And we actually do share vulnerabilities, and they share theirs and so forth, and as well as joke and laugh and so forth. But I think I'd love more men to be able to do that. So
Are You OK Day? So, fabulous initiative to ask the question. What's the next step on from that?
I think we need to make it a habit, not just obviously
one
day or 1 week. We need to make sure that's part of our habit. I think we need to help people know, what do you do next? You ask, are they okay? And they start sharing their vulnerabilities. So helping people to learn, for example, a lot of the time, particularly men, they think they need to fix. They think they need to have the answer. You don't. For men, it's just ask, listen, become curious, and show empathy. Don't need to fix. Simply encourage people to talk, and that is 3/4 of the effort.
2 words, curious and empathy. What does empathy look like?
Again, I'll refer to Brené Brown. She's got some great stuff on empathy, but empathy really is being able to be with the other person and show them that you understand. You don't need to have been in their shoes, but demonstrate to them that you've really heard them and heard their emotional side of what they're saying.
And curiosity?
Curiosity, I love curiosity. Curiosity comes from ignorance. So when people are ignorant, then it's good, ask a question and become curious. You don't have to have the solution and the answers. So ask great questions from a place of real interest. Sometimes I think people don't because they go, oh, I should know that, and they're scared to share their own vulnerabilities. But if you're okay with that, you're going to just ask the interesting questions.
Yeah, I love it. Now, this is a hard question, but have you ever felt that life was just too hard? I'm just too exhausted, too tired, too much?
I haven't felt like that. I've felt that life is challenging at times. In fact, the last 2 months or so have possibly been some of the most challenging periods in my life for a few years. But I haven't felt like, I certainly have never felt suicidal or to that point where it's too hard. But there's certainly been times where I'm not flourishing and where I'm probably struggling. Yeah.
And why?
Good question. I think there's a number of factors. Often I'm a yes person. I say yes to a lot. So for me personally, it can be taking on too much. And it's probably from what I committed to, 2 or 3 months ago, that then says, well, I committed to these and now they're all happening.
And now they're all happening at once.
Yeah, at once. So it's kind of, okay, I've done that again, haven't I? So just being mindful of time and saying yes to too many things, because I love life and I say yes to a lot of things, and sometimes I go, okay, I've overcommitted. Yeah. So it's that. But then when my brother's issues come in there as well, and the sadness of that, and of course you can never plan for that. My brother's with schizophrenia has just been in emergency hospital just the last week, and he's survived and just come out, but almost didn't. So of course you're in the middle of a really busy period. You've got a strategic planning session, you've got all these things happening, and then suddenly out of nowhere your brother's incredibly ill. So it's the juggle of the planned stuff and then the unplanned stuff.
Yeah, and again, the unplanned stuff, it's the things that you can't control. And I think that in and of itself brings some, you can align your life perfectly until something happens.
Something happens.
And that takes, I suppose that's, the buzzword is resilience, but how do you, sort of go, okay, where are my priorities right now? And I think, we've got to get better at being okay with saying, actually, this is my only priority, or this is something that I don't have any choice over.
Yeah, I think that goes to agility, and mental agility, and being able to be in the moment with what you're doing. You can be the best planner, but you have to be able to adapt. One of the people that I love, Adam Grant, and his work, he's done some great work around disagreeable givers. And so really important to be able to, if you're a giver and a helper, that's great, but if you say yes to too many things, it's going to not be good for you or others. So it's really important to be able to say no as well as being a giver. It can be both rather than, so I think you got to set some boundaries, otherwise you're not going to be able to cope.
And we love boundaries. Boundaries are good for us, aren't they? And being able to say no, but being able to be confident in saying no. So again, I think from a cultural perspective, that's a really important thing within a workplace environment, because people often, yes, I'll take it on, and then it's burnout.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay. So projects, what's been the most difficult project you've taken on?
Probably starting a company like Steople and growing a global business.
13 years ago. What did you learn along the way?
I'm still learning.
Yep. We're always learning, aren't we?
Yeah, look, I've gone from it being me at my kitchen bench at home to now a business right throughout Australia, New Zealand and the US. And I think I've learnt that you need to be able to adapt yourself through that time, because as I'm growing a business, stuff's happening in my life. My children are growing up, things are happening, and you need to be able to make it sustainable for 13 years plus. I've still got hopefully many more years. And so it's your ability to adapt and change and grow at the same time and listen to your business. It talks to you, and what it needed from me 13 years ago is different from what it needs from me now. So I've had to really be able to adapt and grow myself.
I love that. I love that your business talks to you. That's a great thing for the listeners, because we'll have startup guys, we'll have entrepreneurs, we'll have founders, we'll have already established, like you're 13 years in, you're an established business, but you are constantly changing. And so if you listen to your business, and you're talking about your customers, aren't you?
Yeah.
Really important.
In fact, I can't own that one. My business partner, Jason Smith, I'll call out to Jason, told me that about 13 years ago. Listen to your business, it talks to you. So I've been using
Jason
it since
Smith, we
then.
like that advice.
Exactly.
Maybe we should get Jason on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, legacy. If you could leave one legacy, what would it be?
I have done some work on this actually. A guy called Bill George has done some True North, if you've heard of it. It's a fabulous piece of work and it helps you understand your legacy and your purpose. I'm not going to get the words right exactly because I can't remember it, but my legacy really in creating Steeple is to create a group of like-minded people who share similar values, different competencies, but similar values in order to be able to collectively really shape work cultures across the planet.
Yeah, and I am a big fan of collective impact. It's so important. You know, you can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. We need to find people who have a similar worldview, values, wanting to do things differently.
Yeah.
So what are you grateful for?
Everything. Look, I'm grateful for so many small things. Even today, at the end of our 2-day strategy session, we had to go around and share 1 or 2 words that we felt at the end of 2 days. And my word was pride or proud. I felt proud and humbled probably is the other one to have been able to attract such amazing people to work with me. And I'm grateful for that, for all those people joining and having faith in me and our business. And I guess on a personal sense, I'm just grateful for I've got a wife and 3 beautiful kids and they mean the world to me, so I'm grateful for that. So at the top of my head there, gratefulness. Maybe one more is my own health. If you don't have your own health and well-being, then you can't do any of that.
Yeah, and that is true. I mean, we can't control the genetics that we're given. We just can't. So for our listeners, if you leave them with one message, what would it be?
Take care of yourself. If you're a helper, if you want to help others, start with taking care of yourself, because if you can't do that, you're not going to be good to anyone else.
Okay, Hayden Fricke, thank you so much for joining us on Life Untangled. It's been great chatting to you. We're going to cover your book in the next episode.
Thank you very much.
Super excited to hear more about it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Life Untangled. I'm Professor Jane Burns, chatting all things life, heart and head.
You're listening to another Torched original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com. That's GETTORCHT.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey.